The first time I heard a grown man call my friend a waste of muscle, it was high noon on the palace forecourt, and the man saying it had a camera strapped to his chest and a ring light bolted to a stick. I was 20 feet down the line, holding my own post, eyes front, and I could see all of it without moving my head. That is a skill they teach you, to watch the whole world while appearing to watch nothing. So I watched the loud man circle Corwin Vane like a buyer, inspecting a horse he had already decided to insult. "Look at this," the man said loud for the lens. "Look at him. You know what this is. This is a costume. This is a guy who gets paid to stand still in a hat the size of a sheepdog." Corwin did not move. Corwin never moved. In 4 years on the line beside him, I had seen him stand through sleet, through a wasp on his cheek, through a drunk who sang to him for an hour. He stood now the way a stone wall stands, not because it cannot feel the wind, but because it has decided the wind is not its concern. "Useless muscle," the man said, delighted with the phrase, turning to his lens so his followers could hear it land. "That's all this is. Big arms, no use. I lift more than this guy before breakfast and I actually do something with it." His name, I would learn within the hour, was Dax Renner. Online he was something enormous. Millions of people watched him pick things up and put them down and shout about it. He had flown in to film himself disrespecting the KingsGuard because, he announced to the camera, somebody had dared him, and Dax Renner never refused a dare. He had the build of a man who had spent a decade making his body the entire point of him. Tank top in a stone courtyard in February. Veins like cords on his forearms. A voice pitched to fill a room that did not need filling. "Watch this," he told his followers. "Watch how useless. I'm gonna get a reaction. There's no reaction. There's nothing in there." He leaned close to Corwin's face. Close enough that I felt the line tighten, not Corwin, the rest of us, the way a rope feels it when one strand is tested. Our Sergeant Halloran was at the gatehouse and had clocked it. I saw him shift his weight to come out. The rule is simple and it is iron. We do not engage. We are not bouncers. We are the still center the whole spectacle is built around, and the moment a guard swings at a fool, the fool wins and the post loses. So we hold. Holding is the job. Holding is the entire and only job, and it is harder than anything that man with the ring light had ever done before breakfast. "You feel that?" Dax flicked Corwin's chin strap. "Not a blow, a flick contemptuous the way you'd flick a bug. Nothing, dead inside. They breed these guys for it." I want to tell you what was behind Corwin's face right then, because I would find out later, and it was not nothing. But in the moment all I had was the outside of him, the jaw, the forward stare, the white glove steady on the rifle, and the outside of him gave that man exactly as much as it gave the sleet and the wasp and the singing drunk. A wall. The most disciplined wall I have ever stood beside. So Dax escalated, because men like that always do. The contempt wasn't getting clicks. He needed the reaction or the video was nothing. "Useless," he said again, and now there was an edge under it, a real heat, because the stone wall was making him feel small in front of his own camera, and he did not like the feeling. "You know what you are. You're a decoration. A man-shaped decoration. If something actually happened here, if there was a real emergency, a real situation, you'd be the most useless thing in this whole square. You'd just stand there. You'd stand there in your little hat while everything fell apart because that's all you know how to do. Stand. Still." He was pleased with that one. He stepped back to deliver it to the lens full face, arms spread, the courtyard behind him, the tourists' phones up, 50 strangers filming a man insult a statue that breathed. He'd be useless, Dax announced, in a reel. And then the strangest thing happened, and I have gone over it 100 times since, and I still feel the floor of my stomach drop when I do. He stopped. Not a pause for effect. He stopped the way a clock stops. His spread arms came down slow, like the air had gotten thick. The grin was still on his face, but the rest of his face had left it, gone gray under the gym tan, a bad gray, a wrong gray. His hand went up to his chest, to the left side, and pressed there, and his mouth kept moving, but the big room-filling voice had dropped to nothing, to a thin scrape of air. "I don't," he said. "I some things." And Dax Renner, who lifted more than my friend before breakfast, folded straight down onto the cobblestones of the palace forecourt like a coat slipping off a hook. For one heartbeat nobody moved. 50 phones kept filming because their owners' brains had not yet told their hands that this was no longer entertainment. A woman near the railing said, "Is that part of it?" in a small voice. The ring light, still bolted to its stick, rolled in a slow arc across the stones and threw a cold white circle over the man on the ground, who had begun to make a sound I will not forget. A high, thin, whistling fight for air that was not winning. And the most useless thing in the whole square moved. I did not see Corwin decide. There is no decision visible in it when he goes. That is the thing nobody who films us understands, that the stillness and the speed are the same discipline wearing two coats. One instant he was a wall on the line. The next his rifle was passed clean into my hands. I don't remember reaching for it, I just had it. And he was on his knees on the cobblestones beside Dax Renner with two gloved fingers already at the man's throat, under the jaw, finding the pulse, his head tilted, counting. "Corwin," I said, it came out of me without permission. "We do not speak on the line. Corwin, the rule." "Off the line," he said, not to me, to Halloran, who had come running. His voice was flat and fast and absolutely level, a voice I had never once heard from him in 4 years, the voice of a man reading instruments. "I'm off the line, Sergeant. He's in arrest or about to be. I need the kit from the gatehouse, and I need the square cleared back 6 feet now." Halloran did not ask a single question. I have thought about that too. A sergeant of the guard, who lives and dies by the line, looked at this kneeling man who had just broken the most sacred rule we keep, and did exactly what he was told, instantly, because something in Corwin's voice told him this was not a man abandoning his post. This was a man reaching a different one. "Clear back," Halloran roared at the courtyard, and to the gatehouse. The trauma kit move, and the world that had been a circus 3 seconds ago turned, all at once, into something with a center of gravity, and the center was a guardsman on his knees in a red wool tunic, bent over the man who had spent his last clear breath calling him useless. I had the rifle in my hands and no idea what to do with my body. You train for the line. You train for a shove, a grab, a fool, a threat at the gate. Nobody trains you for the moment the loud man on the cobblestones goes from talking to dying in the space of 1 sentence. I stood there gripping a weapon I could not use against a thing I could not name, and watched my friend become a stranger. Because Corwin's hands knew things. That is the only way I can put it. I have watched men perform first aid, the panicked, half-remembered kind, the kind where they pump too fast and look around for someone to tell them they're doing it right. This was not that. Corwin's gloved fingers had already stripped the camera harness off Dax's chest and flung it aside. He had 2 fingers laid along the man's jaw and his cheek down close to the gray mouth, and he was watching the chest, and he said to nobody in that flat instrument voice, "No breath, no pulse." And then louder to Halloran, "He's arrested, starting compressions. Mark the time." "Marked," said Halloran, who had pulled out his watch without being told, because a good sergeant knows when a man who has gone calm in a storm should simply be obeyed. Corwin laced his white gloves over the center of that enormous chest, locked his elbows, put his shoulders over his hands, and began to push. I had never seen anything like the steadiness of it. He did not flail. He did not pump in a frenzy the way the movies teach people to. He pushed deep and hard and slow enough to count, and he counted aloud under his breath in a rhythm I did not recognize then but would understand by the end of that day, a marching cadence, the one we learn in our first week, the one that lives in a guardsman's blood. He was driving a man's heart with the same beat that drove our boots down the forecourt every dawn. 1 and 2 and 3. The tank-top arms that had bragged to the lens lay slack on the stones, while the useless decoration kept their owner's blood moving by hand. "He's not breathing," a tourist said, high and frightened. "Why isn't anyone?" "He is doing something," I said, and I heard my own voice shake. "Get back, give him room." 30 pushes. Corwin tipped Dax's head, pinched the nose, sealed his mouth over the gray lips without a flicker of hesitation, and gave 2 breaths, and I watched that broad chest rise not on its own but because my friend was breathing for him, and then he was back on the heart, hands locked, counting the cadence, eyes on the chest, the picture of a man doing a thing he had done before, many times, under worse light than this. The trauma kit came across the cobbles at a dead run. One of the junior men, Pell, skidded down beside Corwin with the orange case and fumbled the latches. "Open it, defibrillator, the pads, the gray packet," Corwin said, never breaking the rhythm of his hands. Pads on bare skin, one under his right collarbone, one on his left side below the arm. "Don't stop me until it tells you to. Pell, look at me, don't stop the compressions for anything but the machine's voice. You understand?" Yes. "Say it back." "Don't stop for anything but the machine." "Good man." I want you to sit with that for a second, because I have. A man we had stood beside for years, quiet Corwin, who ate alone, who never bragged, who answered questions about his life before the guard with one word and a closed door, was kneeling in the middle of a public square running a cardiac arrest like a sergeant runs a drill, naming the gear, assigning the man, making Pell repeat the order back so panic couldn't eat it. I did not know a guardsman could know these things. I did not know my friend could know these things. And underneath my fear for the man on the ground, a second, colder question was opening in me like a door in a dark hall. Who is this? And where did he learn it, and why has he never said? The defibrillator pads went on. The machine spoke in its flat robot voice, analyzing. "Do not touch the patient," and Corwin lifted his hands clear and barked clear. And we all flinched back, and the machine considered the silent heart of Dax Renner and said, "Shock advised." "Everybody off him," Corwin said. "Pell, hands up where I can see them. Clear." He pressed it. The big body jumped once on the stones. A woman screamed. And then the machine said, "Resume compressions," and Corwin was already back on the chest, locked elbows, the cadence, 1 and 2 and 3, calm as the dawn parade, while the ring light lay on its side throwing its cold, useless circle across the cobbles and the phones. God help us. The phones were still up, still filming, but the laughter had drained out of the square and left only 50 people holding their breath for a man most of them had been laughing at 90 seconds before. "Come on," Corwin said low, the only thing in 2 minutes he had said that wasn't an instrument reading or an order. "Come on, not on my square, not today." And he pushed. I have replayed those words more than any others. Not on my square. He had called it his. The man who was paid to stand still in a sheepdog hat, the man called a decoration to his face on camera, had looked at the dying loudmouth and claimed responsibility for him, out loud, as a thing that belonged to his post. As if keeping this man alive were simply the deepest meaning of guarding the gate, and the standing still had only ever been the easy part. 2 more minutes. Another analysis. The machine this time said no shock advised, continue compressions, which I did not understand was bad news, but Corwin did. I saw it cross his face for a quarter second and then get locked away behind the wall again, and he kept pushing, and he said to Halloran without looking up, "Time since collapse." 4 minutes, Halloran said. "Ambulance." 6 out. "I called it before the kit reached you." "Make it 3, Corwin said, and Halloran turned and started talking very fast and very quietly into his radio, and I realized that my sergeant, was now taking direction from the man on his knees, and that nobody in that courtyard thought it strange, because authority had quietly changed hands the instant Corwin's voice went flat, and the only thing in the world that mattered now was the rhythm of 2 white gloves on a stranger's heart. I crouched. I couldn't help it. I set the rifle across my knees and I crouched at the edge of the cleared circle where I could see Corwin's face, and what I saw there frightened me more than the gray man on the ground, because it was not panic. It was not even effort, really. It was concentration of a kind I had only ever seen in him on the worst nights of the worst weather, when the holding was hardest. Except now the holding had a name and a pulse and a 4-minute clock, and somewhere behind that calm face my friend was doing arithmetic I couldn't see. The cold arithmetic of a man who had knelt over other men in far worse places and learned, the hard way, exactly how much time he had. "You've done this before," I said. I don't know why, it wasn't the moment. The words just left me. For one push, too, he didn't answer. Then, eyes never leaving the chest, in that flat, fast, level voice, Corwin Vane said the first true thing I ever learned about his life before the gate. "More than I can count." He never said it like a boast. That is the part I keep coming back to. A man like Dax Renner would have made those 4 words the center of a 10-minute video. Corwin said them the way you'd report the weather, and went back to the cadence, and I understood that whatever was in him, he had spent 4 years on our line making absolutely sure none of us ever saw it. The machine spoke again. Analyzing, Corwin's hands lifted. We held our breath. Shock advised. "Clear," he said, and pressed it, and the big chest jumped, and this time something changed in the gray face on the cobblestones. Dax Renner's body convulsed once hard, and then his back arched, and a sound came out of him that was nothing like the high, thin whistle from before. It was a gasp, a real one. A ragged, ugly, wonderful drag of air pulled in by a heart that had decided, under that flat robot voice and those steady gloves and that marching cadence, to start beating again on its own. "There," Corwin breathed, "there you are." He didn't stop, not yet. He had his fingers back at the throat, watching, counting, ready to go again at the first sign the heart would quit a second time. But it didn't. It held. The gray began very slowly to leave the man's face, the way the worst of a storm leaves the sky, not all at once, but you can feel the moment it turns. Dax's eyelids fluttered. His mouth worked. He had no idea where he was. No idea that the most useless thing in the square had just spent 5 minutes refusing to let him die. "Stay down," Corwin told him, a hand flat and firm on the man's shoulder, the gentlest I'd seen him all day. "Don't try to talk, don't try to move. Your heart stopped and we brought it back. Help is 30 seconds out. You're going to be all right, just breathe. I've got you." "I've got you," to the man who called him a decoration. The ambulance came through the cleared gate with its lights turning, and the paramedics dropped beside Corwin, and what happened next told me more than anything else that day. Because the lead medic took one look at the scene, the man breathing on the stones, the pads in place, the kit open, the defibrillators screen glowing, and asked fast, "Who ran this?" "I did," Corwin said. "Talk to me. What have we got?" And Corwin gave it to him in a stream of words I half understood, and the medic clearly understood completely. The time of collapse, the time to first compression, the number of shocks, the rhythm the machine had read each time, the return of a pulse and how long ago. The man's breathing now, everything clean and ordered, and in the right sequence, the way you hand off a patient to the next pair of hands that are going to keep him alive. The medic's eyes came up off his work for half a second and landed on Corwin's red tunic and tall black bearskin, on the white gloves now smeared from the cobblestones, and then on Corwin's face, and I watched a question move across the paramedic's face that was the twin of the one moving across mine. "You're not," the medic said slowly, "just a guard." "Right now I am," Corwin said. "He's yours, take him." They lifted Dax Renner onto the stretcher. He was awake enough now to be frightened, his eyes darting, his hand grabbing weakly at the medic's sleeve, and as they wheeled him past the spot where his ring light still lay dead on the stones, he turned his head, searching, and his eyes found Corwin kneeling there in the wreck of his immaculate uniform, white gloves filthy, bearskin knocked sideways. The wall finally, visibly, a man, and Dax's mouth opened, and nothing came out. Because there are no words a man has ready for the person who just carried his stopped heart in their hands for 5 minutes after he spat on them. The ambulance pulled away. The siren faded down the avenue, and the palace forecourt stood in a silence I had never heard there in 4 years, not the silence of nothing happening, but the silence of 50 strangers realizing all at once what they had almost filmed. Corwin got to his feet. He picked up his bearskin, settled it, pulled off the ruined gloves and folded them into his belt with the same care he gave everything. He looked down at the cobblestones where the man had been, then over at me, and for one moment the wall was all the way down and I saw straight through to whatever was behind it, and it was tired. Bone tired, in a way that had nothing to do with the 5 minutes just past, and everything to do with however many minutes had come before them, in the years he never spoke about. "I need to wash my hands," he said quietly, "and then I'd like to go back on the line, Sergeant, if I may." Halloran looked at him. Our sergeant is not a sentimental man. He has stood more dawn parades than anyone in the household, and he wears the line like his own spine. He looked at Corwin Vane, who had just broken the most sacred rule we keep, who had abandoned his post in front of 50 cameras and the whole watching world, and he said, in a voice gone strange and thick, "You did not leave your post, son. You took the one that needed standing." And then, clearing his throat hard, all sergeant again, "Wash up. The line will keep your spot warm." That should have been the end of it. A man's life saved, a guardsman returned to his post, the square emptied of its little circus. If it had ended there, it would already have been the finest thing I ever saw on that forecourt. But it did not end there because of the phones, because every second of it had been filmed from 50 angles, including, as it turned out, the man's own chest camera, which had recorded the whole collapse and the whole rescue from the exact height of Dax Renner's dying heart. And by the time Corwin had washed his hands and squared his bearskin and walked back onto the line, as if nothing on earth had happened, the question that had opened in me was opening across the entire watching world. Who is the guard who saved the man who mocked him? And where does a man who is paid to stand still learn to bring the dead back to life? I did not have the answer yet. But I was about to get it, and so was everyone else, because the next morning a car I did not recognize came through the palace gate, and the man who stepped out of it wore no uniform I knew, and he had come a very long way to find a guardsman named Corwin Vane. By dawn the video had gone everywhere. I am told the chest camera footage alone had been watched more times overnight than every video the man had ever made about lifting things, combined. People who had clicked in to laugh at the useless guard, stayed to watch the useless guard kneel in the wreck of his uniform and breathe a man's life back into him, count a marching cadence over a stopped heart, and hand the saved man off to the medics like he had done it on 100 worse mornings. The clip was already being slowed down, the moment marked where the loud man called him useless, and the moment marked, 90 seconds later, where the loud man's heart began to fail. People wrote the same 2 words under it, over and over in every language. The useless man who saved him. And quiet Corwin had walked back onto the line that same afternoon, and stood his post until relief, eyes front, and said not one word about any of it. The man who came through the gate the next morning was lean and gray, and stood like a soldier, even in a plain coat. Sergeant Halloran met him, and there was a short conversation, and then, this is the part that made the back of my neck go cold. Halloran straightened up and saluted him, sharp, the salute you give rank, and the man in the plain coat returned it just as sharp, and I understood that whoever this was, he had once worn something with a great deal on the shoulders. They sent for Corwin. He came off the line and crossed the forecourt, and when he saw the gray man standing there he stopped dead. Corwin, who never reacted to anything, he stopped, and something went across his face I had not seen the whole crisis the day before. Recognition. And under it, very briefly, before the wall came down, something that looked almost like fear of a thing long buried. "Vane," the gray man said. "Sir," Corwin's voice had gone quiet and very young. At ease, for God's sake. I'm retired. I came on a train like a citizen. The gray man looked Corwin over, the red tunic, the bearskin, the post behind him, and shook his head slowly, and something in his eyes was wet. I saw it. The whole world's seen it. I knew it was you the second your hands moved. 40,000 men in this country could wear that uniform, and exactly one of them runs an arrest the way you ran that one. He paused. I trained that one. A long time ago, in a place I won't name in this courtyard. I was close enough to hear it. I am not ashamed to say I had stopped pretending to watch nothing. The gray man turned to Halloran, and to me, and to the few of us within earshot, and he said it plainly, because I think he had decided the world ought to know, and Corwin never would tell it. This man was a combat medic, one of ours, the kind we sent where it was worst, with a kid on his back and no other weapon that mattered, to keep men breathing while everything around them came apart. Do you understand what that is? It is the hardest job there is. Anyone can learn to take a life. It takes a particular kind of man to spend years learning to hold one in his hands while the ground shakes, to stay calm enough to count a heartbeat when every instinct he owns is screaming to run. He did that, for longer than most men last at it. He carried more men out alive than any medic I served with, and he carried out a few who didn't make it too, and those are the ones that stay. The gray man's voice did not break, but it slowed. He earned commendations he never wore. He was offered a desk and a teaching post and turned them down. And then one day he handed in his kit and walked away from all of it, and we lost track of him, and I'll be honest, vain, some of us worried. Corwin said nothing. His jaw was tight. The wall was working hard. And here you turn up, the gray man went on, gentler now, in a wool coat and a tall hat, holding a rifle you'll likely never fire, standing still for a living. And I think I understand why. After what you carried, a man might want a post where the only thing asked of him is to be steady and do no harm and let the world go by. He stepped closer and put a hand on Corwin's shoulder on the red wool. But you never put the medic down, did you? You only set him by the door. And yesterday somebody opened the door. He was dying, sir, Corwin said, very low. He was dying in front of me. There wasn't a decision. No, the gray man agreed. For you there wouldn't have been. He let go of the shoulder. The man you saved has been awake since midnight asking for your name. His people have called the palace 4 times. He wants to come here. He wants to stand in front of you and I don't know what, apologize, thank you. He doesn't have the words. He told the doctors he doesn't have the words. A thin, dry smile. I imagine that's a new experience for him. And I thought about that, the man whose entire trade was words, the loud, confident, endless flood of them, struck dumb at last, not by an insult thrown back at him, but by the simple, unbearable fact that the thing he'd called useless had kept his heart beating with 2 hands and a cadence, and a calm he could not have imagined existed. The gray man stayed an hour. He and Corwin walked the inner courtyard slowly, and I do not know everything they said, and it is not mine to guess. When he left, he saluted the post, not Corwin, the post, the line, all of us, and got back in his unremarkable car and went out the gate and away. And Corwin came back and squared his shoulders, and asked Halloran if he might return to the line. Halloran looked at him a long moment. You know the whole world's out there now, he said. Cameras 3 deep at the rail. They all want to see the medic in the bearskin. Then they'll see a guardsman standing his post, Corwin said. Same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. He settled the bearskin. It's the only thing I came here to be. And he walked back out into the light and the lenses and took up his place on the forecourt, eyes front, still as a stone wall, and gave the watching world exactly as much as he had given the sleet and the wasp and the singing drunk and the loud dead-end living man, which is to say, nothing they could see, and everything that mattered, held quiet behind a disciplined face. But it was not quite over, because a week later the man himself came back. I almost didn't recognize him. The tank top was gone. He wore a plain shirt and a coat against the cold, and he moved carefully, The way a man moves when he has been recently reminded that his body is borrowed and not owned. The big, room-filling presence had gone out of him. There was no ring light. There was no camera strapped to his chest. He came through the public gate on foot, alone, and stood at the rail among the tourists, and looked across the cobblestones at the spot where his heart had stopped, and then up at the man on the line. Corwin stood his post, eyes front. He had to have seen him. Corwin sees everything, but he gave no sign because that is the job, and the job does not pause for a man's gratitude any more than it pauses for his contempt. It was Halloran who decided it. Our sergeant crossed to the rail and spoke quietly to Dax Renner, and then to the relief, and a few minutes later at the changing of the watch, when Corwin stepped off the line in the proper way, with the proper escort, Halloran walked him not to the gatehouse but to the quiet corner of the inner court where the man was waiting. I was on relief myself, and I followed, because by then I think the whole household understood that this was a thing that needed witnesses, and I have never been more glad to have witnessed anything. For a moment the two of them just stood there, the loud man and the still man, and it was the loud man who could not find his voice. I rehearsed this, Dax said finally. His voice was rough, they had told him it would be for a while after the tube. On the train down, I had a hole, I had words, I do words. It's the only thing I was ever any good at, getting people to listen to me. He stopped. His hands were shaking and not from the cold. And I stood there at that rail looking at the stones where it happened, and every word I had just went, because there's nothing you say to the guy who, he pressed the heel of his hand to his mouth hard and got himself back. I called you useless, on camera, to your face. I came here to do that. That was the whole plan, that was the content, get the still guy to crack, and you wouldn't crack, and I kept pushing because I needed you to crack. And then You had a cardiac arrest, Corwin said, level and kind. It was happening to you whether I was here or not. It was not a punishment. Hearts fail, yours failed, that's all it was. It failed in the one square on earth, Dax said, with the one man standing in it who could. He shook his head. Do you know what the doctors told me? They said if there hadn't been someone on me in the first minute, someone who actually knew, not just someone pushing on my chest hoping, I don't come back. They said it doesn't matter how much you can lift. They said the strongest heart in the world is still just a heart, and when it quits, you are exactly as helpless as anybody, and the only thing in the entire world that matters is whether the person who reaches you knows what they're doing. His eyes came up. You knew what you were doing, the useless guy. You knew, and I didn't, and I had spent 10 years telling millions of people that knowing things like that was for people who weren't strong enough to just be strong. Corwin said nothing. He let the man arrive at it himself, which is its own kind of mercy. I owe you my life, Dax said. The words came out simple and bare, no performance left in them. That's not a saying, I checked, it's just true. I have it because you decided I'd keep it, and I called you a decoration. He let out a breath that shook. I don't know how a person carries that. I don't know what I do with that. And here is the thing my friend said, the thing I came to tell you. The thing 50 cameras a week before had not been able to capture, because it happened a week later in a quiet courtyard with no lens anywhere near it. Which is, I have come to believe, exactly why it was the truest thing said in the whole affair. Corwin Vane looked at the man who had mocked him, and then died in front of him and then come back, and he said, quietly, You don't owe me your life. You go and live it, that clears the debt. He paused. I spent a long time before I came here in places where I could not save everyone I knelt over. I have a list of the ones I couldn't. It's long. And every morning I stand that line out there, and I think the standing still is penance, somehow, that the most a man like me should ask is a post where he can do no more harm. For the first time his voice caught just barely. And then you fell down on my cobblestones, and for 5 minutes I got to add a name to the other list. The short one, the ones who walked away. You don't owe me anything. You gave me something. You let me find out the medic was still in there and that he still works. He almost smiled. Useless muscle, you said. Turns out the muscle was never the point. It was never the point for either of us. You just learned it faster than I did, falling down. Dax Renner stood there in the cold inner court and wept openly, without shame, the way a man weeps when something he built his whole life on has been quietly and completely rebuilt for him in a single afternoon. And then he did the only thing left to do. He drew himself up, this man who had flicked my friend's chin strap and called him a costume, and he put his heels together, clumsy, untrained, and he gave Corwin a salute. It was a terrible salute. It was the best salute I have ever seen. Corwin returned it properly, and that was all. There were no cameras. There was no caption. There was just a courtyard and the cold, and two men who finally understood the same thing about strength, standing very still. He never let them make him a story. That part matters too. In the weeks after, the offers came, the interviews, the documentaries, the man's millions of followers begging for the guard to come on and tell it. Corwin said no to everyone. It would make the wrong thing the point, he told me once, the only time he spoke of it freely. The point isn't that a guard turned out to be something. The point is that you never know which man on the line is carrying which thing behind his face, so you'd best not decide a man is useless because he's chosen to be still. He settled his bearskin. Still isn't empty. Still is just a man waiting to be needed, and choosing not to waste himself until he is. So now when I stand my own post on the forecourt, and a loud man comes along the rail with a camera, and decides the still figures in the tall hats are decorations, costumes, men-shaped nothing, I don't tense up the way I used to. I don't need to. I just hold the line, eyes front, and I think about my friend 2 posts down, who once knelt in the worst places on earth to keep strangers breathing, and now stands as quiet as a stone wall in a wool coat, asking nothing, saying nothing, carrying all of it behind a disciplined face. Because that is the truth the loud man learned on the cobblestones, the truth that no one filming us at the gate has ever guessed. The stillest man in the square is not the emptiest. More often than not, he is the one with the most held carefully inside, waiting, the way the best of us wait, for the moment the world stops laughing and starts to fall, and somebody is needed who knows exactly what to do. We are not decorations. We never were. We are simply men who have learned that the deepest strength a person can own is the kind that stands quiet until it is called, and then does not hesitate, and does not boast, and does not stop, until the thing that needed saving is saved. I have watched my friend stand that line 1,000 mornings since. He has never once told the story. He never had to. The man whose life he saved tells it for him, gently now, to anyone who will listen every single day.